Today, we're going to unpack these fairly alarming numbers when it comes to sports card grading month on month. There's a pretty big and significant downward trend since around February of this year, and I want to unpack it because I think this might speak to some concerning things for the hobby in the next 12 to 24 months, especially if things like this don't correct and don't change, because I think it speaks to some underlying concerns that people are not thinking about. And if you are not thinking about those things and you are not planning about those things, you might get burned and left with money out of pocket. Now, obviously, I look like a bit of an idiot today. I'm rugged up because it's absolutely freezing in Sydney. So that aside, please bear with me, but we're going to unpack this today because these numbers are alarming, like I said, in particular, the most recent ones from June and May. And I want to talk about these things, like I said, because it makes me very, very nervous. I want to make sure you guys are sort of thinking about these things as well. Now, if we look at May's numbers off the bat, you'll see that PSA's graded a heck of a lot. They've essentially graded 1.6 million cards in May, which is pure insanity when you think about how much plastic is being wasted as part of this and how many, cards that have been put in slabs that probably shouldn't be put in slabs. It's just ridiculous. And you'll see there's been a month-on-month growth of 6%. It's year-on-year for May last year, 21% growth, which is pretty big. But if you sort of unpack sports cards specifically, you'll see that the grading is down 30% year-on-year, which is a big number when you've sort of got Pokemon booming, which is fundamentally what is causing this huge increase, right? Pokemon is clearly going through a boom. We've talked about on this channel before how you've got so many shows now that are purely flooded for Pokemon. Even historically, sports card focus shows, there is so much Pokemon at these things. You've had Pokemon content creators, sports card content creators become Pokemon content creators overnight. There is so much hype there. These numbers are propped up specifically for those. But seeing things like this is very concerning, right? Because it clearly shows that people are no longer sending in sports cards to be graded, at least not in the numbers that we saw previously. And when you're looking at that boom for Pokemon, that is quite alarming, right? Because clearly, you expect to see booms happen when the economy is going through good upticks and things like that. But, sports cards in this case is not booming when Pokemon is, and that should raise some concerns for people. Now, quickly, you've obviously got CGC's numbers here going fairly crazy. Going up 600% year on year is insane. That's fundamentally down to what it sort of says over here, where I believe they had a partnership with Fanatics potentially for the 50-50 Otani cards, where 100,000 of those went to them for being graded. It's pretty wild, so I would ignore that CGC number for the time being. But even, SGC is down 13%, Beckett is down 13%. And this is not, new. We've sort of seen this coming over the last few months. You can sort of see here, April, 23% down year on year. You've got March down 16% year on year, and February down 6%. So it's a trend that's growing month on month. And I would have expected to sort of see this number a lot higher heading into the National, right? I would have thought people would have been submitting cards to try and get, things coming their way in terms of attending that National and having money to spend. Now, obviously some of this will go to those, concerns around tariffs and them shutting down shop when it comes to international customers. But I don't think it's 30% of the consumer base, right? I don't think it's that big, especially when you've got people out there like myself who can still submit to PSA through things like Ship My Cards or group submitters, right? There are other avenues for people to go ahead and get their cards graded when it comes to overseas customers. I think this speaks to some pretty alarming trends that I want to talk to in 1 second. Just very quickly, the first week in June, as you can see over here from GemRate again on Twitter, sports cards are down 23%, or overall they're down 23%, I should say. Sports cards specifically is on one of these tabs. It's down 29%, so even more alarming and very much in line with what we've seen for May. Now, the reason why I'm a bit concerned about this, and apologies, I'm wearing my pajamas underneath this. The reason I'm concerned about this is sort of what it means if this trend continues, right? Let's hypothetically say that the sentiment isn't there anymore for people to go ahead and submit cards like they did in the past. If you're losing that volume, what does that then mean for, repackers? What does that then mean for card shows? If you've got less people sending cards to be graded, does that mean there's less consumers in there participating? Does that mean you've got less things available for sale at card shows? And sure, straight off the bat, like I said in that intro, so many cards are being submitted for grading that shouldn't be submitted for grading. So maybe it's good that there's less out there and people are focusing in on the right stuff. But all this kind of thing, this volume creates liquidity, in my opinion. That creates cheap slabs, that creates opportunities for people to transact. So if you take that away, and that is being taken away not because people are wisening up, but it's being taken away because people may be losing interest with the hobby. What does that mean if that continues month on month, year on year? If we see this downward trend continue, does that then mean you're going to have less people entering breaks? Does that mean you're going to have less people attending shows? Does that mean you're going to have less people spending money at card shows? Does that mean you're going to have less people going on whatnot and flipping and all that kind of thing? It's almost like a trickle-down effect that might come to fruition and might result in a situation where the hobby sort of loses a lot of value overnight. And this would be things that, myself and others have talked about for a long time. When you're talking about this hobby, we're talking about it, how it's sort of lost its sense in the last couple of years. It's moved towards, monetization. It's moved towards fractionalization. It's moved towards gambling. All that kind of stuff only works if there's people there willing to buy the crumbs, right? The collectors there willing to buy the crumbs. But if that money disappears and you've got less people submitting things, you've got less people buying things, that means there's going to be less customers available, which then in turn is a domino effect and means there's going to be less things to be bought and less people to buy things. And obviously maybe I just talked in circles there, and that's obviously a bit of an oxymoron in some of the examples that I gave. But that's the fear that I have when I see numbers like that. So my thought process is, just keep that in mind when you're going ahead and buying things. I put out a video yesterday, no one watched it. One of the things I said in that video was, again, how I approach collecting. I've talked about this before, a number of times over the last 5 years. I hate spending money on cards because I think they're worthless, right? And I've always been a collector, so I collect them for that reason. But in the modern hobby, I feel really uncomfortable paying $1,000 for a card. I've done that a few times, but I feel uncomfortable doing it because it's like, well, that money could go towards my family. That money could go towards my house. It could go towards a holiday, something, right? I don't feel right spending that on pieces of cardboard, especially things that I've collected since I was a kid. So the way I sort of approach my collecting and still get to collect is, buy cards, flip cards, buy more cards with the profits from those cards. I keep those in my PC because then that's, $0 out of my pocket. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable buying and selling, doing that method, as opposed to taking money, from my savings or taking money that I've put aside in a bit of a kiddie fund to go ahead and spend. Flipping things makes it a lot more comfortable for me. And that's sort of the messaging I want to give to you guys, because again, if these trends continue, right, and next month we see 40%, that is 50%, that is 60%, and next minute there's no one submitting cards to PS anymore, I don't think that's going to be the case. But the concern would be, what does that mean? Does that mean we're going to see that flow into other areas of the hobby, which then removes some of that liquidity, which then removes people's willingness to participate? And if people can't make a quick buck in this space anymore, I think you're going to see a lot of people leave. And if you see a lot of people leave, I think it's going to be pretty scary pretty quickly for people that have spent big in this space expecting things to retain value long term. And I will correct myself very quickly there. Obviously, the things that are important, the things that people actually want, like your RPAs, like your match one stuff of GOATs and all that kind of thing, are always going to command value. We've sort of seen that with MJ, we've seen that with LeBron and other GOATs like that. When I'm saying the money's going to leave, I'm talking about the things that aren't relevant. The current year rookie that people are chasing and paying six figures for that makes no sense. All this bullshit speculation that goes on, that's the stuff that I'm referring to where the money will leave. Because if people, don't have the ability to sort of buy and sell that stuff quickly, it's not going to command the value anymore. And I'm concerned there's people out there that have spent a lot of money on that crap that are going to get burned. So, I want to hear what your thoughts are on this, what you think about this trend, what you think about this whole situation, what you think about some of the examples I gave. I just talked off the cuff today. Hopefully it made sense. So yeah, it is what it is. Now quickly, PSA have obviously shut up shop partially by slowing down the number of submissions they're taking because they've been a bit overwhelmed with all this Pokemon hype. So maybe some of that is the reason why you're seeing sports card dip, but that doesn't hold strong when overall they've gained 21%, because that basically means that aside from the negative 30% there, you've basically had Pokemon do insane, like you're sort of seeing over here. It's grown 110% year on year. That's insane. So it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Feel free to roast me for my PJs and my bathrobe and loser hat, but it is what it is. I'm rambling. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.